Alrighty, so we're going to be having a look at the translated circle relation. Now we should have a pretty good idea of how we can shift it left and right. Since we've got something that looks like x squared, well, we should know that to translate it, it should be x minus b squared. And that indeed is going to move the whole thing b units to the right. The question is, how do we move it up and down? Well, actually, we do know how to deal with this because we just had a look at something that looks like this when we were looking at the reflected parabola. And the way we fix that is by putting y minus c squared. Now, we could really call b and c whatever we like, but in this particular case, the turning point is going to be b comma c, except this function doesn't have a turning point, it has a center. And so the center of the circle is going to be wherever b and c are. Now notice that they're both minuses in the equations, meaning it is going to shift it in the opposite direction. If we jump into Desmos, we can actually have a play with it. So r, as I said last time, r just changes the radius. You can think of having r as negative, but remember, the square of a negative is always going to be a positive. So we only ever really think of r as being positive radius. Negative radius is not really a thing. But let's see what happens when I change b. So b is the term affecting x, so as I move it to the right, it moves it to the right. As I make b negative, it moves us to the left. And as I increase r, that's going to change the radius, but notice the center stays fixed at the point b comma c. Now as I start to increase c, you can see it moves it up or it moves it down. And you'll notice with the circle function that it can actually have one x-intercept, two x-intercepts, or no x-intercepts. Similarly for y-intercepts, it can have no y-intercepts, one y-intercept, or two y-intercepts. So this function is quite an interesting one because depending on what the radius and where the center is, that is going to determine how many x and y intercepts you can end up having. In this particular case, you can see that we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, two x-intercepts and two y-intercepts. And you have to be really mindful. But you can see that these x-intercepts and y-intercepts are a little bit strange looking. And so we are going to, now that we've moved the radius, there's a good chance we're going to have to actually solve for these. But you can have a look and we can find these points. And you'll notice that because we know the center, we can actually work out the 4 edge points by just adding the radius. In this case, it's 3. So you can see that these are the points that we're going to get, and these are the points we're going to be looking for when we start to sketch it. Alrighty, so let's have a look. Alrighty, so let's have a look at this one. So the first thing we need to know is we need to know BC. And remember, we switched the signs of both. So we're going to get BC, which is our center, is going to be equal to 2, negative 3. Notice both of them are swatch signs. Alrighty, so that's our center. And in this case, our radius is going to be the square root of 9, because remember, 9 could be written as 3 squared. So the radius itself is 3. So from the center and the radius, we can actually draw majority of the graph. So let's actually go through and do that. So if I've got my two axes, and I've got the point negative 3, 2, negative 3, so that's 2, negative 3. This is the center of the circle. So with a radius of 3, that means we're going to be taking 3 steps up, 3 steps to the right, 3 steps to the left, and 3 steps down. So from the point 2, negative 3, if I take 3 steps to the right, that's going to take me to the first outer point, which is going to be 5, negative 3. If I take 3 steps to the left, however, that changes my x-coordinate to negative 1, negative 3. If I take 3 steps up, well, that takes me to the x-axis. So it's going to be 2, 0. And if I take 3 steps down, that's going to take me to 2, negative 6. So you can see that these points always have one thing in common with the center, but you can see here we can actually now sketch the circle. And you'll notice that the domain and range are going to be far more interesting than when the center of the circle was at the origin. But anyway, we've now got a basic sketch. But let's do some more interesting things. You can see that we should have only one x-intercept, but two y-intercepts. So there's two y-intercepts here and here. So let's do some algebra and try to work them out. Alrighty, so the x-intercept is when y is equal to 0. So we get x minus 2 squared plus 0 plus 3 squared equals 9. 0 plus 3 is 3. 3 squared is 9. So this just becomes plus 9 equals 9. Take 9 from both sides and we get x minus 2 equals 0 squared. Take the square root of both sides. Now we do get plus or minus the square root of 0, but the square root of 0 is just 0 and plus or minus 0 is just 0. So we add 2 to both sides and we get our one solution, x is equal to 2, which is what we already found up here. So that's nothing unusual. Let's work out those y-intercepts. So the y-intercepts are going to be slightly more interesting, and this is when x is equal to 0. So we get 0 minus 2 squared plus y plus 3 squared equals 9. Solve for y. We get negative 2 squared. Well, that's just going to be 4. Y plus 3 squared equals 9. Take 4 from both sides. 5. Take the square root. Plus or minus the square root of 5. Subtract 3. We get plus or minus the square root of 5 minus 3. And this gives us two y-intercepts. We have the square root of 5 minus 3. And we have the second one where we take the negative, minus root 5 minus 3. Now, if you have a calculator, you can work out what these are in decimals, but we can know for sure that y1 is bigger than y2. Why? Because positive root 5 is bigger than negative root 5. And so that means the first one's going to be the higher intercept. So this intercept up here is going to be root 5 minus 3, 0, root 5 minus 3, whereas this point down here is going to be 0 minus root 5 minus 3. And those are all of my intercept points of this circle relation. Now I'm nearly finished. The only thing I probably want to do now is work out the domain and the range. So for the domain, let's look at the x. So x stretches from negative 1 on one end to 5 on the positive end. So it's negative 1 up to 5. Whereas for the range, we've got y, and the smallest value of y is negative 6, and the highest value of y is 0. So y is in negative 6 up to 0. Now I've been using these bracket notation, interval notation, instead of inequality notation. If you did want to do it in inequality notation, you'd get negative 1 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 5, and for y it would be negative 6 less than or equal to y less than or equal to 0. Either or, it doesn't really make a difference. Just make sure you feel comfortable in using both. So we've worked out that the center, using the rule up here, that's BC, we know the radius, we can find the actual function, and we've got the domain, range, and intercepts. Alrighty, I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.